Donald Trump will become the 47th President of the United States.
Edge to become the 47th President of the United States. He's won.
Gerald Flurry was right about Donald Trump. He was right. My father, again, just to emphasize the accuracy of our forecast. Gerald Flurry was right about Donald Trump. What a dramatic vindication, not just for Donald Trump, but for my father as well. I mean, we're seeing some epic events before our eyes, prophesied events.
This was the message from the Philadelphia Church of God following the 2024 election. Gerald Flurry is vindicated, proven right, and restored as a prophet of God. But is that really the truth? Is Gerald Flurry truly correct? In this episode, we'll delve into what he actually preached to his loyal followers. What you'll uncover are shocking examples of outright lies and manipulations on a massive scale. If you haven't watched episode 1 of this series yet, be sure to check it out first. It sets the stage for everything we'll explore here. Now let's dive in by recapping what he actually said. Here's a collection of quotes from sermons delivered around the time of the 2020 election.
Vice President Biden has been declared the President of the U.S. Now, that's not going to remain that way, even though it certainly looks like it. But it does appear very strongly that, well, this man's going to be President of the United States. But I absolutely do not believe that at all.
Office of President of the United States.
Because I think it's all contrary to Bible prophecy. President Trump is going to remain President of the U.S. But I'll tell you, brethren, I think Mr. Trump is going to stay in the office.
Now Congress has certified the results. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power.
That I'm saying God is going to keep President Trump in office. That's what I'm saying. And it's right there in the Bible. I believe President Trump is going to continue to be the leader of this land. And the only thing that could stop this from happening would be if I had made a mistake 100% into this, and if it doesn't happen, well, then I'm going to have God show me where I made a mistake or where I was in error.
How did we go from Gerald Flurry saying a Joe Biden presidency is contrary to Bible prophecy, that Donald Trump would remain in office and be the leader of the land, to Gerald Flurry was right about Donald Trump, the accuracy of his prophecy, and that Gerald Flurry is vindicated by this 2024 election result? Let's examine some of the tactics they employed to distance themselves from these failed prophecies, starting with Gerald Flurry's heartfelt apology.
But I did make a mistake, and I certainly deeply apologize for some people that I'm sure were somewhat confused or upset or whatever. But if you look at the first century apostles, as you well know, they were 2,000 years off in their thinking about the return of Christ. So 4 years is nothing.
The apology concluded with a dismissive and disrespectful whatever, rendering it half-hearted, insincere, and dismissive. This is followed by a ridiculous joke in an attempt to make light of the situation, treating a serious or important matter as insignificant, thereby downplaying its importance and trivializing the issue. Gerald Flurry then tries to laugh it off with a chuckle, further dismissing and deflecting the gravity of the situation. He now shifts the focus to include his followers in the mistake by changing the language from I to we. He then normalizes the error and deflects accountability by stating, "We are all flawed people," while seeking empathy and understanding by identifying himself as a fellow flawed person. Have a listen.
And if we make a mistake, well, we just have to apologize and realize we did make a mistake. We're flawed people. I'm a flawed human being. We're all flawed. We're going to make some mistakes. but maybe this mistake is a little different than other mistakes.
This mistake is a little different than other mistakes. With this statement, all integrity is lost and cognitive dissonance takes full hold. The outcome of the election conflicts both with Gerald Flurry's self-image and with his followers' belief in him as that prophet. This creates a tension between what they believed would happen and the reality of what actually occurred. To resolve this dissonance, they face two options. Either collectively admit they were wrong and acknowledge that Gerald Flurry is not a prophet, or find a way to reinterpret the situation to align it with their belief system, thereby making it their truth. At this point, the snake truly begins to slither. Check it out.
But I did make a mistake, and I certainly don't want to act like there was no mistake. But then on the other hand, there might not have been a mistake. But I do think, brethren, and this is, I'm not trying to defend my error, if it was an error, but it is conceivable that God could have allowed my article error. I do certainly feel badly about some people being, let's say, upset and maybe angry. But that's okay. If God has something he's trying to get across to them, we all get upset and angry sometimes because God corrects us. And those people out there need correction as well. So I don't really think that's a big problem. And if he can certainly correct me, and if he needs to, he will. And I really regret having upset people and doing something like that, unless, well, that's what God wants done. But this is not a failed prophecy. It's not a prophecy at all. It's what I said.
Now his error is presented to his followers as being inspired by God to correct the church. This tactic is called learned helplessness. For more on this, check out our articles on thedispel.com. He then concludes by expressing no regret as he is fulfilling God's will, essentially retracting his apology. Then Gerald Flurry makes a shocking claim that it's not a prophecy at all, it's just what he said. So, how does he explain saying this before the election?
Why President Trump will remain America's president. Now, that's a very important prophecy. God has not shown me where there's any error in that prophecy that I have made, but this is one of the major prophecies in the Bible, and I'm certainly 99.9% sure that we're absolutely right about that prophecy. And if you look back at you could say, well, Flurry may have made a 4-year mistake in his prophecy.
In an article on the Trumpet website entitled, "Why This Inauguration Day is Especially Historic," Joel Hilliker, Gerald Flurry's son-in-law, calls it that prophecy from Mr. Flurry. And again, he states, Mr. Flurry's prophecy is out there. He goes on to say, and now only God can back him up. This is an up against the sea, trapped by the mountains, army at our backs moment. Nobody can change this except God. God will intervene so his prophecies will be fulfilled. Many people are watching us closely. If God does not intervene, a lot of people would feel justified in accusing Mr. Flurry of being a false prophet. From this, it is evident that Gerald Flurry's statement, "It's not a prophecy," is completely untrue. Since he claims to hold the title of that prophet, everything he says is a prophecy when he declares that something will or will not happen. However, there are no accounts in the Bible of God's prophets making mistakes when delivering prophecies and getting it wrong, even though prophets themselves sometimes sinned. For example, consider the theme in Joel Hilliker's article, where he describes an up against the sea moment. Imagine the case of Moses, who sinned against God when he said, "Must we bring you water out of this rock?" and then struck the rock, symbolizing Jesus Christ, twice instead of speaking to it as commanded. Even though Moses sinned and made a mistake, the miracle still occurred because Moses was a prophet. If it hadn't, it would have undermined the people's faith in God, as his power and authority were being demonstrated through Moses. Gerald Flurry has now laid the groundwork to persuade his followers that he is beyond reproach and that only God can correct him. Seizing this moment, he reinforces his false narrative to solidify in their minds that the election was stolen.
There's not even a hint of any, let's say, any time between his presidencies or him not even being president. You don't read that anywhere. So there's not even a hint of that. Again, God didn't give us even a hint that there was a time gap in Amos chapter 7. Why is it God didn't put a gap there? Well, because there isn't one. There is no gap because the election was stolen. I believe that God showed me that the election was stolen. I already believed it, but I really believe it now. Because these people that are in charge stole the election. And this is the guy that says he's president of the United States now. And I think God says, no, I take exception to that. You're not supposed to steal the election.
That prophet, who claims to speak on behalf of God, now says that God revealed to him that the election was stolen, stating, God said they were not meant to steal the election. But the question remains, who are they stealing it from? Even his own son is aware that scriptures like Romans 13:1, among many others, make it clear that God appoints and removes leaders from power.
That God allowed the election to be rigged 4 years ago, and then God didn't let it happen. He didn't let them rig 2024 like he did in 2020. God allowed it.
This means God did the exact opposite of what Gerald Flurry predicted. God allowed Joe Biden to become president, even if it was through fraud. He still achieved the office. 100 years from now, history books will reflect that Joe Biden was the 46th president of the United States of America. Now, Gerald Flurry fully engages in intensifying the indoctrination of his followers.
But let me just tell you, I think there's an irony in all of this. The article, Why President Trump Will Remain America's President, may be correct. It just may be correct. And so I just want you to think about this, because to me, it just makes a lot of sense and a lot of logic, and God is very logical. But I want to ask you, brethren, do you think maybe God hasn't said it, maybe God, there is no gap there, there's nothing there, because God knows it was a stolen election, and so he looks upon Mr. Trump as being president of the United States. Well, if there is a gap there between presidencies of Mr. Trump, why didn't God tell us about it, at least have a word or two about it in Amos 7? And there's nothing there that I can see at all. Not a word about some gap between Mr. Trump's presidencies, and that would be, you could say, a kind of message from God to saying, well, there is no gap because he's still president. If the election was stolen, well, then really President Trump is still president, the way God would look at it. And frankly, the way I believe God is showing me this, I had that question in my mind, it came into my mind, and I believe God inspired it. And so it adds quite a lot of weight to when you're talking about a stolen election, if you really believe that God himself is telling you it's stolen. And I think that is what God is doing. That's what I believe. Mr. Trump remaining president. Well, did he? I think God says he did. I believe God said yes. I think he's letting us know in a coded message. Isn't that title okay then? Why President Trump will remain America's president may be correct. In God's eyes, he is president of the U.S., I believe, totally. And what does that mean? Well, if God says he's president, who's going to stand up to God? Who's going to stop God?
Here is Gerald Flurry's logic. There was no gap in his prophecy about Donald Trump. Since God didn't tell him there was a gap, and as he is that prophet, his interpretation must be correct. Therefore, his error is actually God sending him a message. Therefore, he is correct, and Donald Trump is still president. By Gerald Flurry declaring, "I believe God is telling me this." God says he remains president, and insisting it is a divine message, Gerald Flurry forced his followers into a difficult position. Either accept his claim and go along with this narrative or leave the church. Anyone who voiced disagreement was swiftly suspended from the church, effectively cutting them off from friends and family. This has caused the breakup of many families and relationships, leading to chaos and division as members left or were put out. Furthermore, as you will now hear, anyone who dared criticize him was accused of being influenced by the devil.
We have a minus 36 people from God's church. It's from October the 1st to November the 1st. It's just 1 month that many people left the church. There is a kind of Gideon's army being tested by God. We're different. We're not like other people. We'll give up our family if we have to, physical family and even the spiritual family or whatever. Now the critics, those that have left recently, are coming out really criticizing heavily because they're being used by the devil. So they're pretty good disciples of the devil. Now, people can disagree with that, but we're all going to be judged by God and judged by our faith in this work and our faith in what God is doing.
Gerald Flurry now uses fear as a tactic to control the minds of his followers. He claims that if you do not believe Donald Trump was serving as the 46th president, you will face judgment from God. This manipulation of God-fearing individuals is inherently narcissistic. Driven by an inflated ego through his self-appointment as that prophet, Gerald Flurry refuses to repent, instead preferring to force his followers to accept a false narrative. If you have been affected by the PCG or any other cult, we would love to hear your story. Whether you've just taken your first steps toward freedom or you've been on this journey for years, your voice can be a beacon of hope for someone else. Together we can shine a light, dispelling the darkness and show that there is a way out and a way forward. Your story matters. Please reach out to us at thedispel.com. In the next episode, we will continue this story of manipulation in the Philadelphia Church of God, including this complete U-turn by Gerald Flurry.
I have said before, I thought there was a pause there for this stealing of the election, but I wasn't absolutely sure. But I feel absolutely sure now that there was a pause there.
thedispel.com.
Like, subscribe, and share.